We're going to move right along to introduce Roland Hemming.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. Cunning choice of venue so we can all get a bit of Christmas shopping in later on. What was interesting, Mark, earlier talking about the history of some of sort of network products and talking about, I think, telephone stuff in the 1890s, but actually a group of English archaeologists did some digging down. They dug down about 500 metres and they found that 1,000 years ago the English had actually had copper telephone networking. And a bunch of Scottish archaeologists heard about this and not wishing to be outdone, they dug down 2,000 metres and they found that 1,000 years ago that they found little traces of glass, just little bits of glass in the earth and whatever. They said, well, we had an optical fibre network, you know. The Irish hear about this and they dig down 3,000 metres. They look around and see nothing. It's just nothing. So, well, we had a wireless network. So I've been doing networked audio for about 15 years. It's rare that I do a project that doesn't involve networking. And as part of the work we do, specifying systems, and also we advise manufacturers on roadmap and things like that, whatever, it's important to us to know what products are out there, what products are networked, what protocols are they using, that sort of stuff. And we did some research. We've been doing this now for a couple of years in different ways, and it's sort of very much a sideline to what we do, really to find out how much networked audio there is. And there's a very, very simple answer to that. We don't know. And actually, anybody who tells you they do know, I think is wrong. Nobody knows really how much networking there is, how these things are being done. And so, what don't we know? Well, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know how many of these devices are sold. None of the manufacturers reveal their sales figures. They don't tell us the value of those products or how much profit they make from them. So somebody may be selling a whole lot of low-cost devices. And, it's exactly the same as Apple and Android and whatever. People are saying, well, Android has loads of market share, but Apple make 86% of the profit in the mobile phone market at the moment. Well, what good is market share if somebody else is taking all the money, as an example? So there's a whole lot of things we don't know. We don't know how these products are used, actually. Were they actually used in the network? Say, for example, the Labgruppen PLM amplifier is one of the most successful Dante-equipped products. But it's a touring amp. My guess would be the vast majority of its deployment is not networked. So is that a successful network product or not? Or is the Dante port just a sort of accident, an extra feature that was added that some of us have used? And we don't know if those projects were even successful in their use of networking, whether actually analog would have been better or whether they should have chosen one protocol over another. So we started to look at this a couple of years ago. And the first thing we did is we looked at licensees and the rate of growth. So we looked at CobraNet. There's been no real change in the number of manufacturers claiming to be a licensee of the technology for many years. And we looked at the growth of Dante, licensees growing. The jagged graph, by the way, is purely from when the date of when the announcements were made, and sometimes that coincides with trade shows, which is why you got a sudden jump of when it's announced. With AVB, we divided it because at the time when we completed this work 18 months ago, there were about 50 members of the Avenue Alliance, but when you actually looked at the number that were relevant to us, the people not in automotive or people just making silicon, it was a little over 20, and that number has actually stayed fairly constant since then. And I apologise, we didn't look at Ravenna at the time. So last year what we did is we did some research to count actually the number of products, because if I'm trying to specify a system, I want to know what is my choice of product. That's actually all I'm interested in. And so we did some work last year, and we've literally just completed this work this year. So AVB, last year there were just over 20 products, now there's nearly 60. Now, the thing I have to say is we spent a few days on the research last year, and we discovered that we weren't as diligent as we could have been. So there's been a growth across all the protocols, and we think a huge amount of that isn't genuine growth in the number of products being available for a particular protocol, but we were buoyed by the support we got from the research we did last year. So frankly, we just spent more time and were more diligent. So these comparisons aren't necessarily fair or accurate. And again, with Cobranet, still the leader in the most number of products available, and we discovered many, many, many more this year. Dante, again, huge growth, and in fact the largest. Ether Sound, we discovered more, you can get the idea. And Ravenna, again, a large increase. And I think it's worth pointing out, and I know a lot of people are from that market, the other protocols are used primarily in the sort of what we call the pro sound market, or professional audio installed sound, whereas Ravenna currently is very much focused on the broadcast market, so direct comparisons aren't necessarily fair. But that's the sort of the growth that we discovered, and as I said, some of that is genuinely more products on the market becoming available, and some is just us just being more diligent. So the numbers in full, really, there are almost 800 network products available on the market if you want to go out and buy networked audio devices. And what we'd say is just under 700 of them are actually useful. The others are interfaces, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But actually, products you can buy that have a network port on the back, just under 700, and that number's changing all the time. And they're the numbers, as you can see. So I think, it's not really worth talking about them. They speak for themselves in terms of choice and what you have there. And if you wanted to look at it in terms of sort of market share, as so many people like to look at, personally, I don't like the notions of market share. Market share arguments tend to be used as a weapon. And then when you ask people, well, why is that important? They can't really justify why that's important. Frankly, in most businesses, the money is more important, not whether you're, selling more of it or things like that. And I wanted to really highlight the caveats to the research that we've done, because there are a great number of them. And I think most importantly, it's a really small data set. When you're dealing with 800, minor variations from manufacturers can actually distort the figures hugely. And that's why I urge you to leave today not saying, oh, there's X number of Cobranet products on the market or stuff like that, because all sorts of things have twisted this. And I'll highlight that. As I said, one product line of a particular manufacturer can change everything. We've done our best to try and see if products are discontinued. But it's difficult if it's on people's website, short of phoning people up and saying, do you still make it? And we didn't have time to make that number of phone calls to find out. That's very difficult, and I would say there are more discontinued Cobranet products than anything else. Now, is that because Cobranet is being superseded, or is it because those products have just ended their natural life anyway because Cobranet's the protocol that's been around the longest? I don't know. And as I said, we don't know about sales volume, profit, and actual use of these devices. And as I said, not just is it discontinued, but is it really shipping? And we come across this time and time again where people announce a product and then, it never happens. And I have to say, AVB's been particularly bad at that. We discovered 11 products where the announcement was they will be shipping, including one from 4 years ago, and those products still don't exist. And why that's different for AVB as opposed to others, sometimes people pre-announce, but it was definitely a trend more in AVB products of people pre-announcing things that then for some reason still haven't come to market. I'll give you some examples of the skewed data. So more than half the AVB products are from 2 manufacturers. The vast majority of the Cobonet loudspeakers are one manufacturer. It's just because they happen to have a huge number of product lines. In many instances, they're tiny variations of the same product that take a Cobonet card in the back. And as I said, all this research is done from a user perspective. I'm interested in buying a product with a network port on the back. So it's unfair for me to say, well, they're all basically the same speaker, I'll count them as 1 or 5 or something, because that, either way we look at this data, it could be a distortion. And what I'm trying to do is give you the data in a more raw form than try and necessarily interpret it in a way. But as I said, we've been looking at, skews. And again, a quarter of all Cobonet amplifiers are one manufacturer. So again, where we see Cobonet having that huge market lead that you saw earlier, actually that's demolished if you were to do some statistical manipulation of those two manufacturers with over 70 products. This data will be available. We've got an app which we hope will be out next week, which will let people search for products. So you can type in Dante amplifier or Ravenna mixer, and it'll tell you the ones available, and you can put them into projects and export them as a shopping list. The real purpose of this, partly to help people specifying systems, and partly just to help get this research done more accurately, partly to help fund it, and partly to get manufacturers giving us information rather than us having to trawl for information, so manufacturers can submit their product data to us. It was particularly difficult to do, and we set out a number of rules over how we counted products. So, for example, a 16-channel desk was counted as a different product to a 24-channel desk. Seems fair, because I would be specifying it as a separate device. But these days, that's really difficult to do, and particularly we found with Ravenna devices, Lavo desks, potentially there are 100 different versions. Do they count as 100 devices? Well, no. Another issue with signal processors. If something was a sort of 16-bus processor with interchangeable cards, you could put in 4 in for 12 out or 18 8 out, we counted that as one product. But if it was a 16 I/O box or a 32 I/O box, we counted that as 2. So we set out various rules on how we counted it to try and make it fair, but frankly, it's impossible. I mentioned interfaces earlier, and we see those as product enablers. All they are is a card that goes in the back to make something into a network product. And the reason why the numbers of devices, if you were quick enough to count them, add up to more than 800 is because some devices work with more than one protocol. In fact, some devices work with 4. I think there's even one that does all 5, but I could be wrong there. So they don't count as products in themselves. They're just a necessary evil to give us the network product in the end. And software is a real problem where you've got something that is being put into, for example, this Mac can put the Ravenna or the Dante software in it. That then becomes a network product. Well, we weren't going to count every PC and Mac on the market to say, well, they're all now network products. We counted those as one, although the applications for those are enormous. So another way we looked at this is how active are each of the networking communities here? So how many manufacturers are actually shipping product? So out of the supposed 55 Cobonet licensees, about 35 of them actually have products. Again, I think Ordinate are saying they've got nearly 200 licensees. There's only 57 manufacturers you can buy from. Again, AVB is 8. Ravenna 7. You get the idea. So these are people who are actively doing stuff with those protocols, not just signing up, seeing what's going on, talking about it, thinking about it, but actually delivering stuff that you and I want to buy and use. And then another way we looked at it is product choice. So we divided up the products into different categories to see what type of products are available. So first of all, we looked at mixers. If I want to go and buy a mixer, which protocol gives me the most choices? And you can see in that case that Dante have the most choices. It doesn't necessarily mean that the AVB or Covernet mixer isn't more suitable for your application, but just from a sheer choice point of view, that's the one with the most options at the moment. And again, microphones, very few games in town. I'll talk about that in a second. Again, signal processors, on the whole, dominated by the big two. Loudspeaker processors, hardly any. Transport. Now, in some ways, I look on this category as an irrelevance. These products should not exist. These are products whose aim is purely to get audio onto the network and off the network. And the only reason why these products exist is because not everything is networked yet. When we have network microphones and network loudspeakers and everything has a port on, then we shouldn't have these products at all that let you get stuff on and off it. This product category should die. Playback and recording, again, not much really that's properly networked if you don't count software products. Amplifiers, loads, again, especially from the big two. Loudspeakers, again, there's the example of the skewed data, that one manufacturer actually dominates the Covernet thing. If we remove them, it would be a lot more balance between Covernet, Dante and AVB. Again, software, there's really very few products, 6 in total, that actually are sort of software network products. Conference systems, again, people hardly doing stuff with networks there. And again, this is one where the data is skewed the other way. There's 18 intercom products that are AVB, and it's one system from one manufacturer. But because we're counting SKUs, 18 of the 58 AVB products are actually one manufacturer with one intercom product. So again, this is why we're concerned with how we've got this data together, because it can give an artificial illustration. So then we also divided it up into percentages to see, right, who's got the market share of different product categories and things like that if you want to buy things in, and you can look at that. And then the final thing we tried to do was look at what we called variety factor. So which protocol offers the most products, but also offers them in the most categories, and also has the most manufacturers, a bigger community working on it. And we tried to put different weightings against all this, and frankly, any way we did that could have been seen as bias in one way or the other. Because, for example, Ravenna actually doesn't sit in very many categories because of the nature of the product for the market it's normally selling to. There aren't any Ravenna loudspeakers. Why would they be, necessarily? Although maybe there's some coming. So we decided not to do that, other than just say, this is the order of which you get the most variety. So which community gives you the best combination of manufacturers, products, together. And that's really the order at the moment. If you weight them in different ways, the bars go from 3 times the size of this building to 1 centimetre high, and everything between, depending on how you wish to interpret how important is manufacturer choice over product choice over category choice and things like that. And you'll notice now that we've creeped in A67, which is obviously important. And currently, out of that lot, there's 38 products available that are AES67 compliant, so more than the number of Ravenna products, which we know Ravenna basically gets that as standard. Ordinate have said in the first quarter of next year they will make Dante AES67 compliant. Lots of people are saying, yeah, but they won't actually do it. I've asked them on numerous occasions, straight to them, will you be doing this? And they have assured me they are. They might be lying, but I'm by this stage I'm pretty sure they're not. And that changes the landscape quite a lot, because then more than 360 devices will be AES67 compliant by the time, by early part of next year, and That's actually more than half the network devices, and that's assuming that the manufacturers allow the firmware updates and things like that, which apparently is straightforward to do. And what that really does is that changes the nature of the community a bit. So in terms of growth for AES67, on one side you have people, obviously Dante, Ravenna, Livewire, and also, in fact, it's the manufacturer that loudspeakers today, QSC, they have their own proprietary protocol, QLAN, that we've included in our research. We've also included proprietary protocols such as VSS Blue Link and QLAN and things like that. But they this summer made QLAN AES67 compliant. So those products get added to that family. What may hinder growth of AES67 is continued and ongoing use of Cobranet, and there are still more Cobranet installations in the world than anything else, just because it's been around so much longer. But of course, people are still buying devices and modifying those installations rather than just tearing it all out. And of course, any growth for AVB, where AVB, my understanding is, will not be AES67 compliant for quite some time to come. As far as I'm aware, it's talked about, but nowhere near any roadmap at all. And this raised an interesting question for us. If the world is going to be an AES67 world, how is that going to work? And one idea that we've been discussing is, let's say I design a system for a concert hall, and will I use QSC gear? And I'll use QLAN, and that'll connect from the processor to the amplifiers, and that's all fine. And then you come along, you're a touring rental company with your Dante system, and one of the most common things in the world, you bring your own PA system, but you want to plug into my under-balcony delay loudspeakers. A very common thing to do. So then you'll open up some AES67 streams, go into my QLAN system, and off we go. Meanwhile, Mr. Broadcast turns up with his truck. That's all Ravenna, and then either the venue or the live guy just opens up 67 streams for that, and sends that to the broadcast boys, and everybody's happy. So we could have a world where you have fiefdoms, where each protocol is used for its own benefits within the sort of installed sound, the live sound, and the broadcast sound environment. And AES67 is used as sort of a compatibility between them. Or what may happen is, why might I use a Dante mixer with a Ravenna amplifier and QLAN loudspeakers or things like that, and actually use AES67 as a lowest common denominator because, well, it works. I don't care about all the other features. And that then leads us to the question, will there be a features war between, let's say, Ravenna and Dante, saying, well, you've got to use Ravenna because of the pure Ravenna experience gives you all these extra things as well. And these are things we just don't know yet, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and how well that works. The thing that's important really to note is that networked audio is still a tiny proportion of audio projects. I mean, our estimate, and it's purely an estimate, is probably between 1% and 3%. I mean, we're at the unusual end where just about everything we do is networked. But why aren't pub bands using network audio? Wedding bands? Why isn't it just used everywhere? And the reason why is it's just still too difficult to do. You've got to pay people like us to help get it working for you, which, is all very well, but it shouldn't be like that. And there is a lack of true interoperability. And this isn't the same interoperability that Jan was talking about earlier in terms of the audio networking. All these protocols work very well for the audio networking. It's actually making the devices talk to each other in a way that there's a very sensible way of configuring them so they work as an audio system. Not getting the networking bit right, that should just be invisible anyway, but actually configuring the audio and the amount of negotiation that needs to take place for that to work just isn't happening. And we've gone on record saying this, that we think all audio products are designed incorrectly. They're designed from the wrong standpoint. They're designed around features rather than being designed around interoperability, to actually make systems work together and make systems do things that sound engineers actually want to do. And the OCA is making some moves towards that, and people are sort of mixing up what the OCA are doing with control with what the networking people are doing with networks. But it's not providing truly seamless systems in the same way that other industries are doing. We are miles away from where the lighting industry is, the rigging industry is, and certainly where the IT industry is. Miles away. And it's still a pro-audio and broadcast niche. These products, all these protocols, you go outside of this room, or this community, very few people have heard of this stuff. And one of the problems is the endpoints. As I mentioned earlier, getting the signal on and off the network currently is expensive. You have to buy these things that shouldn't exist in the first place, and they're cumbersome to set up. Once networking is built into microphones, then that would be useful. But again, setting up something dumb like a microphone is difficult to do. How are you going to configure a microphone that doesn't have a user interface on it? It's easy when you've got a desk, you've got screens, you've got buttons, you can plug computers into it. You can't do that with an A758. So, and this is what I mean about the interoperability, that people aren't thinking, well, how do you configure and route and test something like that? Or a wall panel in a conference room that's probably at the panel at my feet that just takes a network connection in and configure that and route that. No one's putting thought into that. And finally, breaking over the divide of getting it beyond products that are used for professional audio, video products, video switches, video matrixing that use video conference systems that are used in tens of thousands of installations in this city alone. Why don't they just have a networked out connection? Video servers, I mean, a lot of those are just embedded PCs. So adding the Dante or Ravenna sound card in software to that to make those network devices would be done. But those conversations aren't really taking place. And we do think that those software products do and will help democratize audio, will help it sort of break over the wall of pro audio into sort of more general use that will mean that, you know, musicians will start using it in their bedroom, and you could argue that Motu are doing that with some of their products. And also, I think my final thoughts on all this is there's too much focus on standards, and people are always banging on to me about, well, we've got to have a standard, and we've got to have a standard for this and a standard for that. And I sit on standards committee. But to me, the use of protocols isn't about that. Protocols are not standards. We regard protocols as products. When we are specifying a system, I'm specifying products, and my choice of protocol is a product choice. I'm not making it for some dogmatic reason because I like to adhere to this standard. I'm trying to make a solution work for a client. They don't care whether it adopts a particular standard or not. All they want to know is, does it work? Does sound come out of one end and, you know, in one end and out the other, you know, in a timely manner? So we regard these protocols as ecosystems, actually, and that's, we think, how you should think about them, and whether your type of work that you do fits in with the ecosystem of the product choice available. And these protocols should not be standards, and I don't like the fact that they're talked about as being standards. The trouble with standards is, on the whole, they don't evolve properly. We are used to our computers and our smartphones becoming obsolete. You know, iOS 5 is out of date, you can't use it anymore. Or on iOS 8, get used to it. We're used to the fact that we have to sometimes sacrifice products for new features, new security, new compatibility, things like that. And the problem with some standards is the fact that they've just stuck there, not been developed, and at some point they just become irrelevant because they haven't evolved, because there is this adherence to too many standards. And I've said this before, this is what happened with MIDI. Why are we not standing here today at the MIDI 15 conference? What stopped MIDI being developed? MIDI 2 could have been 10 times faster. MIDI 3 would have had stereo audio. MIDI 5 would have had 8-channel audio, and it would have just slowly evolved and developed. And the reason why is they got it over the line and didn't really do much else with it. And I think I'm very concerned about that happening with some of these protocols unless it's accepted that they're evolving products like everything else. And they should use standards as building blocks, absolutely, but they should still evolve. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roland. That was